Khalil Gibran once said, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars." The Vulnerable Power Show is a deep dive into the heart of leadership. Hear raw insights and wisdom from experienced leaders who transformed during their dark night of the soul journey, now bringing light to the world. Spotlighting heart-centered leaders that have transformed, stepping into their fullest light and mission. Learn how you, too, can weather life's storm and thrive. What are the keys for successful personal growth and life-changing transformation? It is my intention to bring you wisdom, empowerment, hope, and inspiration, so you too can ascend to your fullest light as a leader, to bring about impact for the collective good. Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to a special edition of the Vulnerable Power Show, where today we're going to be talking about the power of vulnerability or healing through vulnerability. And now some of you may be asking, well, Hass, this is a show about leadership and vulnerability. What the heck are you doing talking more about healing? Well, to set some context for everybody that's tuning in, I studied to be a physician, and I stopped and transitioned to other realms. I have physicians in my family, 2 older brothers, and personally, when I practiced law, I went into healthcare law, and I believe that healing, healthcare are vital for leadership. And I have here today, again, returning a dear soul sister, Tanja Seagraves, who's a very powerful healer, and you may, if you haven't already, want to go back to the 4th episode of the Vulnerable Power Show so you can hear more about Tanya's story and background. So I asked Tanja, and we were both inspired to do more on the series of healing, and primarily because for leaders, it's important that they actually heal within, and that's really going to be the premise for today. And as always, we're here to go within and I guess you could say, uncover the keys to transformation in order to inspire and bring hope to other leaders so that they can step into their heart-centered nature. And in this episode, learn how to be healed from within and how to reclaim their power through healing. So Tanja, how you doing today? And thank you for being here.
Hi, Hass. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me again.
It's a beautiful idea, and I'm glad that you got the proverbial download and said, Hass, I got some insights. Let's do a couple more. And today on 11/11, allegedly a very numerologically and cosmologically powerful day. So we're going to open up space. You had a quote, I believe you said you wanted to share, right, Tanja? So why don't we start there for everybody to kind of set the tone for today?
Yes. So the quote for today is, if we go deeply enough into ourselves, we come out into the universe.
Wow.
So, and this quote came to me last weekend because I was just reviewing something, and I thought most of us, we think we have to go outside to get more information, go into the universe, do all those things to get the information from outside. But really, and on my own journey, I also experienced that. It's like going within, being vulnerable, going into the discomfort, because we are so used to, being outside, out of the body, like analyzing mentally, like analyzing it, talking about it. It is uncomfortable to go inside, and especially if we have a lot of, somatic, experiences, somatic stuff going on. Here comes my English again. So thingies. It's uncomfortable, but I have learned if we go within and then we go out into the universe, then we can bring, our knowledge, anything we need to bring to this planet, we have to go through our body. That's why we got a physical body. If not, we could just be floating around in space without a physical body.
I love that. And it really does, it dovetails what I always think of, and you hear it a lot, of being the change. So in this essence today, it's going to be uncovering, as you alluded to in that quote, and then that follow-up of what are the keys of that going within? How do we go within on a practical level, from more of a science, medical, like not per se medical, because we do more integrative work.
Yeah, I know. I think medical would make sense. And also, like, I can, throw in some stories, like things that I've tried, because obviously I've tried so many things over the years. Everything has its valid point, and everything brought something, but certain things were just like getting on, it's like, yeah, it was just if it keeps me inside my head, it doesn't heal what's happening in my body. That's just what I've learned over the last 15 years.
Well, let's start
probably
there.
Even my whole lifetime, because growing up in Germany, we're very cerebral. Emotions are like, you don't really have emotions.
Yeah, that's culturally, right? You have culturally,
like the Japanese kind of like
a lot of people. I think it's now everybody, because that's the whole burnout epidemic and the trauma epidemic. And I like that you brought that up intrinsically in this, improvised way of that. Anything else, if we don't go within, remember what you said to me once. I remember when we first met, and I shared a brief snippet of this, of how we met. A lot of my angst was being in my head and disassociating or escapism. And you said the other day, there was something when we were talking, when I came to see you for another session, was it compensation or something to that effect? Can you start talking about that a little bit in relation to the head? So this notion of how we compensate or how we adjust to actually avoid the discomfort, to avoid the pain, and avoid the going within. I feel like that's because that's a big hurdle for the clients I meet, and I'm sure the clients you meet, and many healers. And
myself,
I know we both did it, right?
I got so sick because we are not being taught to feel and go within and sit with a physical sensation. For me, that's also how I grew up. It's like, obviously, the birthy thing, like what we talked about in the first episode. And then, life, but it was always a conditioning and compensating for a physical restriction, but then also a psycho-spiritual and an emotional component, because everybody is unique. We are all individual. We have like this roadmap, which I look at our birth chart. I mean, it's like a roadmap. There are only good things. I don't look at it like a negative thing, even if someone
everything's there for.
But hello, it's still, that's why we probably chose it on a certain level. But so we're constantly compensating. It's either we are not allowed, and I see that when I work with the children, also adults, but also with the children. We always have to be nice. We cannot hurt someone's feeling. Well, not so much in Germany, so I wasn't raised that way. No, I had to respect elders, but it is what it is. But you can't really say what's going on, because what are the others gonna think about me? But then you're just internalizing all this, and then it creates a sensation, because obviously your brain always dumps into your body. The brain, you have a dominant organ where the brain dumps to. It's just like this line, and we study that in visceral manipulation, one of the advanced classes, just to disconnect this. It gets a life of its own. You can't even control it anymore. So they're like the typical liver people or the stomach people, and then you can, obviously put certain characteristics to it, but again, that would put someone into.
Let's slow down. Let's slow this down, because this is, as a practitioner, what may be, again, common sense for you. For some of the listeners, whether they're healers or not, they may not be as advanced as you are in your credentials. So can you go a little bit, dissect that a little bit? What do you mean about restrictions? What do you mean about, like, it gets stored in the body? Can you maybe, through anecdotes or whatever comes up inspired, flush that out before we could.
Maybe you talk about your anecdote.
Oh, the one. Okay, so because I shared with you, right?
Which you had forgotten about, right?
No.
And I didn't know what it was. That's another thing. When I work, in my work, I've really just focused on the body or spirit and what your body shows me. I do not see the story, because probably I don't know if I chose to block it off, but it's also not, because if I tell someone their story, then I'm making myself an authority over them. So for me, it's like, I would just say, like I said to you, Hass, what is it with your foot? Because your foot is just yelling at me. But I didn't know, what the story was until, and then of course you didn't say anything because you couldn't remember. It was so long ago, until I finally had it, and I just put my finger into that spot on your foot, and then you got the memory.
Yeah. So that it's a lot there. So this is now a good entry point for that, because I was meditating this weekend and I got an intuitive, download, so to speak, of the what I call the glass in the foot story. And I called you. I said, "Oh, we got to talk about this on Wednesday," because it came through. And so what Tanya's alluding to, and it's funny, Tanya, because since I mentioned this to you, I had another remembrance. So ever since, and Tanya may not know this, so ever since I was a child, my mom told me this a few years ago, because part of my healing journey, as Tanya alluded to, is, I was disassociating. I was really out of my body. I was mentalizing a lot. And I knew the stories, I have these themes that I hadn't actually felt through them. I hadn't done the body work around it. And so when I was a child, my mom, about 4 years ago, I started to excavate a lot of this. So what Tanya's alluding to is part of my healing journey with her. My mom said something 4 years ago, which is apparently I walked funny. So similar to you, Tanya, only in a different way. And so when I went to see Tanya, as she was alluding to, she did some work and then grabbed a point on my foot. All of a sudden, I was transported back to when my family would go to a local mountain range and we would do a family picnic. And one time I remember with my cousins, and it had to be around 7, 8 years old. I was rather young. And when I was in the water, I stepped into a piece of glass into that left foot. And I had totally forgotten this episode. I hadn't remembered it. And what Tanya did and pointed out was how my muscle memory, and of course you can speak more to this as a practitioner, how my muscle memory, my nervous system had housed that pain, had housed that experience, had stored that shock. And then and again, I didn't know, ladies and gentlemen, I presumed I was in alignment. I would go to chiropractors. They would notice some stuff. She is very good at what she does. And she caught this. So why don't you elaborate from, if you remember, and I know, like you said a moment ago, for you as a practitioner, you're remaining empty. And so a lot of times you don't store the episodes of the clients because, again, you don't want to take that energy on, or transference, so to speak. And from what you recall, or maybe as a practitioner, what do you sense was going on, if you don't remember, in my body, for the listeners? What happened when that glass went into my foot?
Well, so when I can't remember, I think I was at your head, right? When I was
Yeah.
I was on your brain.
Yeah, you were up
Yeah,
on the
I was
torso.
on your brain.
Yeah.
I can't remember what I was doing. Maybe I was not doing anything, but
You made it look good. You made it look good.
And that's just how I work, because it runs through my body and I feel it in my own body. It's not like a terrible, but it was just like it made my foot itch like crazy. And I'm like, just go away. Kept treating your brain. And then it became like so loud that I wanted to just scratch my foot. And I'm like, what the heck is this? That's because you couldn't remember. And the way we talk, of course, I don't talk with all my clients that way, but it's like,
right. We have a more intimate relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, what is it? And you just couldn't find it. And I had to go there and put my finger on that spot, because your body, that's the thing. The memory in your body, so like is it the etheric body? Who knows? I mean, I don't know, analyze it. Your spirit was so loud and like bothering me, like go there, like made my own foot itch like crazy in that spot. So that's when I touched it. And that's when you were completely freaking out, because then your whole body remembered all this. So how it usually happens with injuries, and like, and everybody, doesn't matter what injury, it has an impact. You were little, it hurt. You kind of like, that's where you do the compensation, because you don't want to step on that foot. So you're trying to compensate and walk a certain way afterwards, after it happens. But this pain is still in there. It's horrible. I'm cutting your foot with glass, and I'm like a really squeamish person. It's like, when we do a little surgery like frenectomy and I have to look at it, it's like, I'm gonna, I don't want to see this. Like, I'm just gonna take the pain out. I don't want to look at it. But so anyway, I can only imagine with the glass and with the kid. Number one, you were scared, you were hurt, your nervous system, and I don't even call it muscle memory, because if you know me as a person, I don't give a penny about muscles. I don't really care about muscles. The muscle is just the wastebasket of the body. It has the nerves that actually make it tense. So the muscles are there to keep you balanced. If something is out of balance, the brain sends a message to the muscle, hello, this person is going to tip over, you have to tense. That's how we get, tensed muscles. So it was that memory in the in the fascia, in the nerves. I think it's more nerves, because when I have to cough again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have corona. Because I've trained so many different modalities, but what resonated most with me was also the nervous system, because we have so many nerves. We have like 60,000 miles of nerves.
Yeah, no.
So that memory in the nervous system, in the etheric body, who knows? But it comes up, and then you compensate, you walk a certain way, you're so used to, just like, what I was saying, like how I used to walk. For me, it was, when I was a kid, I had that lift. It's like my body just grew around that restriction. And just for you, with your foot, eventually you found a way to walk on that foot without it making it hurt. But then, of course, the rest of the body, again, that's where the muscles come in. The rest of the body has to figure out a way to balance you.
So it's like dominoes, in a sense, is kind of what I think of. And because even now, as you're talking about it, I feel a little tingle in the left foot, right? Because I remember what comes to mind is one of my professors was famous for phantom limb research, where where you have the limb amputated or something's amputated and they still have the sensation, which is what I feel that goes to your point about not caring about the muscles. It's more of the nervous system, because the nervous system.
The etheric body, which is.
Well, elaborate on that. What do you mean? So etheric body, again, so some of the listeners may be new to this information. So what do you mean by etheric body? How does this interplay with the nervous system in terms of, this body intelligence or this body memory, so to speak? As best as you can.
Yeah, just the basic thing, because, depending on what.
It can get really advanced. Exactly. Keeping it basic.
Tools you look at. If you look at, like, because we have so many more bodies, but if you just look at like basic Rudolf Steiner, you have the physical body and the etheric body. The etheric body is our blueprint, and the physical body forms after what's happening in the etheric body. And then you have the astral, which is our, emotions and stuff. And then you have the persona, which would be the ego. But the etheric body and the physical body are very much connected. So so you can cut off the physical part, but that blueprint is still there. Just like when I'm treating someone and they had a woman and they had a hysterectomy, there's still the energy of the uterus or whatever they took out is still there. So I still treat it. I just, sometimes when they don't tell me, or when I do a remote session, every person who does healing work or whatever, who works with the body, you have created your own dictionary. So for me, there's always, when one person pops into my head, I'm like, because it's like, connect this person with hysterectomy, then I know, that person had, even if they wouldn't tell me, but you can,
I like that.
And the energy of the uterus is still there.
I like that, because I guess that goes back to kind of the quote or the premise, right? Because the physical body, and so much of modern society, we focus on only the physical or the material. And I sense the analogy for it is, by going to the physical, we can access these other dimensions or these other bodies, which is what you're alluding to, the etheric, the emotional bodies and things like that. And that was what was fascinating for me when I started to work with you, because this wasn't new information for me. It was the depth, again, back to the depth of which you took me into my body, into my nervous system. And you said it to me once recently, this last year, when I started to get really into this really deeper healing with you. I think the analogy that came forward, and you may not remember, because I know a lot of times when you're working on me, like myself and my sibling, you get into your practitioner state, so to speak, was I likened it to surfing the nerves. I feel like is what you taught me to do, is to go into that and ride my inner nervous system and kind of maneuver that inner landscape. Is that something you feel is easy for people to do? Or how, like, from your experience, I'm curious now, because it pops into my head, how many people can do that? What you can do naturally? I know it's a gift that you have and training. Like, how would you talk to people about that if they weren't like us? How would you talk about getting into the body and the nervous system?
Yeah, it's not that easy.
Okay, so talk to me. What steps would you take? Yeah.
Right. That's why I also got so sick, because I wasn't able to always do it. I was just like, and then of course there are different levels of sensitivity. For me, it was just like anytime before I became a therapist, even when I was a therapist, I sometimes, like on my own healing journey, I got so overwhelmed with feelings. It's like you're feeling so many things, you can't even dig through it. Now these days it's super easy. There might be just one big thing that comes up, and I'm like, okay, so you just sit back and you just feel it, feel into it, and then you might get the story.
Mm-hmm.
But most people, when we're not feeling well, we're just overwhelmed, we're just full, we don't even know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
Usually and that also determines the outcome of the session, and also and how people really how they heal. If they just want to stay in their story out there, they come in, they don't, it's like, I don't even think it's not trust, because if they wouldn't trust me, they wouldn't come.
I think we talk about safety, right? It feels
Yeah.
like safety is the word, like a safe haven almost, like, because that's what you did for me. Because even now, and I know I interrupted you, like what comes through is this, because we had a question from somebody about the inner child stuff. And for me, this correlated to the inner child stuff because I didn't know how I had suppressed it, in my nervous system or in my emotional body. So it accessed, as you alluded to, so much. I like cried and wriggled on your table because it was almost like little Hass. That inner child was still wounded within me. So it's interesting that you say that, because I feel like that's what's uncomfortable for a lot of people, is because they have so much of this suppressed stuff in the body that it's the safety, not the trust. I know they're synonymous. So that's what I feel like you do for people. It's starts there, that you create the safety in your persona and your aura, so to speak, about it.
Yeah, but then still, it's like for some people, it's just, and I think that's where sometimes even that's where psychotherapy could help. Even though I'm not really, but for me personally, I'm not really a fan of over analyzing stuff. But for certain people, it will help. But some people just they do not want to get into their body, feel what is happening. But it's also an attitude. They're very negative. That's again where the metaphysical or the spiritual training will come in. Where like, practice, having gratitude, just like when you do the gratitude gatherings, feeling, like self-regulating. Like when you have a negative thought come up, instead of riding on it, or like, or like gossiping, talking, bad about others without even knowing that, all those things that society
Reactive
kind of
patterns.
like reacting,
Yeah.
talking. It's a dissociation, also deflecting, because you don't want to look at your own thing. And then there's of course also victim mentality. Is like everything always happens to you. It's like, yeah, blah blah blah. I mean, I was also, at one point, like I said in the other episode, I was hurting, and I was like, with all the injuries and stuff. But I never had that feeling of like revenge, like, oh, now I have to get back at them, and who did that to me. It was more like, what, that's what happened. It's the past. You can't really, if you constantly dwell on the past, let's just see what can I do now.
Well, it's also, that is interesting, right? Because when a lot of what I realized, because you brought up the victim, which to me, I think of identity. And recently I've worked with a couple of people doing more of the soul level stuff, because, it's fascinating, because you go at it from the body and I'm coming at it from the soul. So it's a little bit of a integrative approach, is that we're so attached or identified to that story of the illness. So I was talking to a gentleman the other day, literally, it was yesterday. And it was a really mini session. And it was interesting because I heard, like you were talking about your story, same with me. I had that victim narrative. And then I'm like, okay, can we move forward? And it was like, I thought I was moving forward. I was like, no, everything you've talked about is the past. And it was interesting to me because as you know, I did it, you did it, a lot of people do it, is that I feel like it's scary because if I release this story, who would I be? Because I've known nothing other than this story, this pain, this illness. Like Tanja, like with her lift, Hass, had his.
Yeah, Tanja has a short leg. That was always the story. Tanja has a short leg. That was a projection.
And then we had a question on that. Yeah, we had a question on that. So let's plug that in with that. What were people's treatment of you like, right? Because you had a story, then you healed the story, and then you're no longer that persona, right? Because you've done the inner work, you've transformed. So yeah, Tanja has this leg. Tanja is always ill. So then how did people relate to you when you got through the other side of the healing and you're no longer that? How was that? Because that was a question that we got asked when we fielded questions for this. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like that projection and the people. So it's all, when we get sick, doesn't even matter if it's like physical, if we, get mentally sick or whatever. It's we are not ourselves because we are constantly conditioned. That's where again goes back to why I like the human design as a deconditioning tool of really learning who you are, really keeping your boundaries and like, oh yeah, no, I'm not that person. That is who I am. So a lot of people there fall away. So for me, most of the people it's just, I mean, except for my parents, but then the rest is like, I don't even, it's like, yeah, I have nothing in common with them to talk about. Sometimes they ask, "How are you doing?" But there's also this. When I was joking yesterday, I'm not going to say that because it's mean. It's like, but that the depth of consciousness or just the way people are living. It just is. So for them, or for a lot of people, it's just like you're either sick, you talk about your sickness, you go to the doctor, you get a pill, and then that's it.
Did you, during your healing process, did the people around you stop you or make it tough for you? Not literally stop you.
No,
I meant in terms of like you wanting to fit in. Because I know for me, it was wanting to fit in.
No.
Okay.
No. Fit into what?
Well, in terms of like, I feel like nowadays, right, we're all looking for community or tribe. And I feel like I always
I'm not.
Well, you're not. You're
Hey, I have individual definition. I could give a
yeah, you're more of a hermit than even I am. And
I'm a hermit.
Yeah.
No, I always enjoyed my alone time. It's like, nah. I was always like, no. When I was a teenager, I used to walk around like a punk rocker, and then later all those things. So no, I never gave a penny about what others. It was kind of. But that was already getting out of this collective
conformity
Bible thing. So I never really, I mean, of course, everybody wants some community, but not like I'm also not a person. And even when I was sick, or even before I got sick, I'm like that, I'm like that ghost, that wanderer. It goes from one. I used to be like this, like I would hang out with this kind of people, observe, participate, and then I learned enough, and then I would find the next clique, like the next group of people. So I would hang out.
Like a social butterflies, I believe what it's called.
Yeah, everybody knew me. Like in my hometown back then, it's like everybody knew me, and I kind of like didn't even know everybody because I was more like just floating and experiencing life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also why I can be on that level. I can be with anybody. I don't really care. You can put me today. I don't know.
Well, it's because I would say
have a conversation with anybody. It doesn't mean that I have to spend my life with them or make them my best friends, because I don't even need that. Yeah, no, for me, it's just, I like the excitement of life and the unexpected things.
So if we can pause here, because again, so for people listening, they may not be like you. And so what I see is you may be an anomaly in your persona and how you show up.
Yes, I am.
And then two, I feel it's a testament to you having done the inner work that you can be neutral and meet people where they're at. So now from my experience, what I found was fascinating. And I feel like a lot of people may resonate with this, which is I may have that of a hermit. I feel a lot of people crave community and tribe, and it lends itself to conformity and conditioning. And so I too was a social butterfly. Unlike you, I feel I attached to that persona more, and I wanted to fit in at any cost over doing the healing work and having to spread, kind of distance myself, because what you said, I don't believe it's mean. It's this notion of the deeper we go into this work, into this transformative work, into this healing in the body for today's context, the higher our vibration, the higher the level of consciousness, the more expansive we become, which goes back to your point that you're not bothered, that you can stick with anybody.
But look at it, because then you individually, if you would look at and that's again where I like I just like, that evolutionary astrology and also human design, like, because you are not me, and you might have all those markers, what you came into this world to be, a collective person, a tribal person. I'm more like, and that's really, once I figured out and I look at my chart, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm living that, and it's okay to be like this. I'm more like the hermit or the shaman, the healer you put at the outside of the village. And you only come and see me when you have a problem, like a health issue. I help you, and then just leave. So but that's in my design. That's who I am, but that's not who you are, and that's not who many people are. So that again comes to the conditioning. So there's not just the physical conditioning, but also the mental, emotional, psychospiritual, just the collective and the tribal conditioning.
I like that. And so to kind of break this down. So, I mean, we're talking, in terms of like, if we were to say, how do we do this? Right. Or steps or healing by numbers, like paint by numbers, so to speak. I would say, so we're talking step one, in a sense, loosely, generally speaking, is awareness. Bring your awareness within. And then now it seems like what's emerging from this conversation and being, spoken about is to know thyself, right? So Tanja is talking about human design and markers, which are more of different ways you can learn about how you operate. How does Hass operate? Both on an energetic systems, which is human design and conditioning and emotional. And Tanja is going to be different from Hass. Each person's unique. And I find it's interesting, Tanja, because you said you taught me a lot about human design, and it's important to know yourself. And even more importantly, if you've never known yourself, you can't have that story of this is so. I used to think I'm always energetic. I'm an extrovert. I'm these things. And now I'm surprising myself that I'm actually not as much of an extrovert because I never got a chance to allow my essence through this healing process, right? So a lot of people think not only that they are an illness, they think they're a certain way, and they've never known anything different, which is a part of this vulnerability brings the healing, because it's stripping back again these layers. And now we're talking about the restrictions, the physical layers, the physical angst, pain, trauma that's stored in the body, the dis-ease, so to speak. So this is good. I like how we're riffing here. So you have right now, I want to ask, because I'm sure the audience is like, okay, case studies, so to speak. What's like, I'm curious, the most, because I like the extremes. The Sagittarius side goes, give me the most extreme case you have. What is the most disassociated thing you've seen by way of a client that you've had, in terms of how bad, before and after, how bad was it? What did it look like? And then where did you bring them? So we can start to maybe show the audience like the steps and more of the nuts and bolts of it. Do you have anything that comes to mind? Or if not, we can kind of fish a little bit more, so to speak.
Let me see. Well, actually, I had just recently, but it was not about dissociation. It was more like,
doesn't matter. Bring up what's coming through.
Because I like to look at the, of course, every physical, ailment also has an emotional, psycho-spiritual component. So that, just like I said in the beginning, but I do not like to write on it and analyze it. I've done that in like somatic experiencing, and I think after 4 sessions, I'm like, this is just nonsense. We're just talking about the same stuff. I get body aches because we're not really releasing it in the body. So
what is somatic experiencing? Explain that real quick while you continue, before you go to the case
which
study.
is actually, it helps a lot of people, just, not everybody. Just again, like, there's no one thing that fits all. Somatic experiencing is, you're sitting with a practitioner. Often they're also craniosacral people, or they are psychotherapists. It's all about getting PTSD and trauma out of the body. So, when people have the shaking, or when you have anxiety, so they will guide you. The practitioner will, you will usually you sit, because most of the time they're not allowed to touch you because they're psychotherapists, I think. So they will sit with you.
Depends on their license.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then you will scan your body and feel how you're feeling inside your body. And then they will guide you so you can find the story behind the somatics, which is good for some, but for me it was like,
so it's good to excavate, is what I would call it. It's good to do that defining, right? It's like once you bring it within, the awareness within. So this somatic experiencing seems to help, like in those early stages. Because I agree with you. I sense what you mean is it won't really go to the,
you know what? I wouldn't even say in the early stages. I think it helps because what I see from when I'm working with people, and if I only have to see them a couple of times, it's for me balancing the system, opening it up, so that then when they go and do this somatic experiencing or whatever else they're doing, they can move it through the body with more ease. Because when you have a physical restriction, energy, your emotions, computer, EMFs, whatever, 5G, whatever people talk about, constantly hit that restriction. So when I can help you get that physical restriction out of your body, the therapies that you're doing afterwards are going to be so much more effective. So it's more like,
so again, it's the stored trauma then becomes a physical restriction, is what you mean, to link those.
Yeah, of course. You
Okay.
have everybody is born with the physical restrictions. I doubt that there's any baby that comes out that doesn't have like something. I mean, you have to go through you have to be born, right? You have to grow inside the womb. You have the imprint from your ancestors. I just said that to someone yesterday again. My dog trainer in Germany, and that was before I became a therapist. It was in 2005. I was kind of like shifting. I learned that thing from her, and I always think about it. When I went to puppy school with my puppy, because I never had a dog before, I'm like, I might as well just go to puppy school, even though it's a Chihuahua. It doesn't matter. You can train any dog. My Chihuahua was like a pit bull. So I said to the teacher, I'm like, my dog does this weird thing, and I do not know why, because I got her in 12 weeks, just right from the breeder, from the dog mother. And the dog was doing this funny thing, like taking the food, running away, even though there was nobody to take the food away from the dog. So I said that to the trainer, and she said to me, oh yeah, that's what the mother dog did when the mother was pregnant. So my dog, or everybody's dog, got that behavior from her mother while inside the womb. So look at it, so that's my puppy, my dog school teacher in Germany knows those things. A lot of people know those things about animals. So now if you look at human beings who have a different layer of consciousness more than animals, why are we still so ignorant to ignore that things that are going on with us are inherited? It's the environment. We talk about it for animals, but we don't talk about it for humans. And that's also what somatic experiencing, or even the somatic emotional release, your cranial work, you get those out of the body. And then there's certain practitioners, like in somatic experience, they like to talk about it. Like I said last time, I've gone through the training with the somatic emotional release, the cranial cycle. The way I'm working these days, because I've trained a lot of things, and then I always find the latest thing. I treat it mostly without dialoguing, because I just don't want to dialogue about stuff. If we have to, yeah, we can dialogue. It happens every now and then. But especially with this osteoduce, where I don't even have to talk, I just go into the etheric, the energy of the bone and the joints. There's nothing to talk. It's just like, you just experience it, you just feel it, and then it's just happening. I mean, you know it when you get on my table.
It's fascinating.
I don't dialogue much with you.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. So two things come up. So it's fascinating because, you think about modeling, and like behavioral work. Like modeling is one thing, is if you see the parent do it. What you're talking about is a whole nother level. It's a genetic imprint that you're in the womb and you're inheriting these traits, these conditionings, these have been, and so that's one
Like
thing.
epigenetics.
Well, yes, epigenetics is that niche. And so it's fascinating because as you say this, it reminds me of my own process, which is the second thing that comes through. I feel like healing is a process and it has stages. So perhaps the other way to frame it for the audience is, some techniques, modalities, methodologies like somatic experiencing may help you on the earlier stages in this excavation of this starting to go within, starting to define. And then as you get to the later stages, talking about it and only doing the narrative may not actually do the final release. And I agree with you, because I like you asked before this, what came through me, yes, in our sessions now, there's very little dialogue because I'm at this, what I would call this last stage of this embodiment work, where I look at it and I go, yeah, you go in, it's like, and you're doing the work, and then whatever's coming up. And I'm now more, thanks to you and the other work that I've done on myself, I'm able to have that interoception, that inner body awareness to go, and I'm not numb anymore, desensitized. So I go, oh, that's a little bit of anger. All right, I feel it over there. Oh yeah, okay. And then, and it's less uncomfortable. It's less scary, which goes back to, yeah.
Yes, that's a good word, because it's scary. It is. You know what? Sometimes I think about it, and I might not be right, but it's like, no, I am right. I'm right. I'm German. I like to be right.
Yeah, German. Well, you're in your Taurus, and you like to be right. No,
Of course.
I'm kidding. So it's interesting, right? Because
so what I was about to say.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
It is like those little deaths. It's literally, if you go within, that's just what you're saying. It's scary, but eventually you get to that point. You have to cross that threshold of death and dying It's not like you're dying physically. It's what, it's what all those mystics and people, spiritual teachers have spoken of before, the death of the ego. The ego has to die. The ego is afraid. It is the ego that is keeping you away from going within.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have done things, if I tell, sometimes, I mean, when, I would tell people about it, what I have done, but not necessarily like my clients or patients. It's scary, and I'm still thinking about it. I'm like, oh wow, I can't even remember how I survived that. It's like scary as hell. I did it. So now it's like when you come out on the other end, and of course, I still want to live like maybe 40 years, maybe even more, maybe 45 years. Who knows? So there's always something to work on, right?
In a sense.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have to stay here. But eventually you come, something happens and you feel it and you allow yourself to feel it. Maybe you have to cry. That's also a good one. I used to never cry until I became a therapist. And then now I cry all the time. When I get a headache, I have to cry because it's like, I don't like headaches. So that's always a sign of emotional thing. But just like you're saying, it doesn't get as scary anymore. You just look at it. It can be a terrific pain, which in the past would have sent you like, I have to go to the emergency room. I need a pill. I can't handle this. Now it's more like, oh shit, it hurts. Excuse my English. It hurts so bad. It's like, what am I gonna do? Just breathe through it. It's like, oh my God. And then just going deeper into the pain to the point where you almost think that you're fainting, and you might faint.
It's a capacity increase. So there's a lot here. So one thing is when you talk about death, again, I hear death of the story, death of that egoic construct, that identity of I'm sick or I'm only hyper, for what was my story. And it's interesting, right? Because here we have shift the awareness within, start to know what's happening, define the narratives, and then feel into the pain or feel into the blockage, which goes back to the last episode, right? Which we talk about mastery. Yeah. I see mastery as really, because a lot of people tell me that, and you said it in that riff right there of this notion of, oh, well, you always have stuff to do. Well, yes, I feel like what you alluded to, you get through a break, this final veil where you have the capacity. You can hold, and that's what for me mastery is you can hold the fullness of the experience. So yes, in a sense, throughout life, it's a spiral, as you know. There's more to, be, more to experience, more to release in that expansion of the universe. What's fascinating is you cross the threshold, as Tanja is talking about, and I felt it too, where you have the tolerance or the capacity, where you no longer are squeamish. And that it's interesting because here's the point for me that comes up. It led to me being relaxed. And remember what you said on the phone, because it was interesting to my experience, Tanja. I want you to now, and we still have to do the case study. I forgot we jumped. You and I love to jump around, so we'll go back to that case study that I interrupted with a question. Is you said something that happened to me when I started to work with you and the other osteopath. Was you and I both, we got so relaxed it actually freaked us out. So when we started to do this process of healing, the body was so used to constriction, the nervous system was so used to alarm, that when we relaxed, I actually felt like I was having a panic attack, is the feeling from being so relaxed.
I mean, when I just look at myself, but for me, actually, when I have a session myself, which I don't have often, like whatever, twice a year, or whenever I do something, or when something comes up, when something big comes up, I look at it, I feel it in my body, and if I can still kind of like handle it by myself, I'm good. If I can't, then I have to, get some help. And and then I allow myself to be vulnerable. For me, it's also the thing that might just be who I am. It's like when I go and see a doctor, like my doctor, when I go and see him, it's like, number one, I'm paying money. This is my only shot in like maybe 6 months or how long the wait list is. I'm just gonna be as vulnerable as I can. Why wouldn't I? Why would I keep my guard up? It's like I'm going there because I want to get better.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm usually a train wreck when I come in. It's like I always think like I'm fine, then I sit down, I'm like, and I cry about something, and then that leads to whatever. Since my trusted doctor knows then how to treat my physical body, and then it's not so much about just my story. So that's what I like about it. I don't have to go and sit with a psychiatrist or somatic experiencing practitioner, cry about the story and elaborate on the story. It's more like, no, we don't have to elaborate it. I just talk about it, and then poof, it gets treated in the physical, and hallelujah.
You said the key word. You said
It's
the key word.
it's like a game of life. I look at it like a game of life. There's always like one little task, and the task gets easier. Yeah, it gets easier. And there are not so many, so there comes up one, might be a big task. It's like, oh, I don't play video games, but obviously I know what a video game is. Everybody's sitting on their video games, playing and trying to get a new life, and in your whatever they're counting this and that. It's like, why don't you just do it with your body? It's so interesting what is inside you. That's like you're going within and then coming out into the universe. There's so much amazing stuff. I mean, you know what happens when you get on the table, the funny things.
Yeah, it's a miraculous.
It's like, oh my goodness.
It's miraculous. So you said it again. I mean, the theme over and over again, and not only when we talk about it in other episodes as well, is this allowing, which vulnerability is about the allowing. So it seems like in healing. So is it, my brother talks about this and I've heard this before. So is it true that healing is automatic if you allow it? Is that, I would say more or less?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It happens because you don't resist it.
So the resistant, that classic, I've maybe
that's the ego thing, or the fear. It's
which you then create the resistance, which then creates the persistence of the illness.
Yes.
As applied to healing.
Yes.
So how does that work on a biological level? Not like the cellular, like as a practitioner doing the body work, how does the resistance make your job more difficult? I know you alluded to it about you got to relax on the table. Like, how does it diminish the efficacy is what I mean. How does it actually?
It just gives the person, it still gives the person results, but eventually after, 3 sessions, it's like, I also, like I said, I like excitement. When I don't see progress or I get bored, I'm not like someone who says, you have to come in 10 times. I don't want to see someone 10 times. I have some people who come in because they have bigger issues, or they're also just not following what's suggested, because there's always the person who is sick, but who always knows better than everybody else. So it's like, I heard the story of one guy who's a doctor who sits in a wheelchair, and he kind of like insulted Deepak Chopra. So it's like, I guess Deepak Chopra was just sitting there like, I hear you. What are you gonna do, right? It is what it is.
Well, it's and I like that approach. I share a similar approach where if they're resisting their own progress and it's not a monetary gain, I would rather them say, look, I feel like we've reached a conclusion here. You need to move forward.
You don't even have to say it. It's energetically, it just happens. But it is what it is. But no, a lot of people, you still get results, obviously, because we're balancing something in the physical, we're treating, and that also makes it easier for you to go more deep within, and that's the other thing. It's like I said in the other episode, it's not like I jumped on the table when I started getting those treatments, like deep diving into into the abyss and see what's happening. No, it takes time. So that's also fine. It's like people, just need to be a little bit, easy on themselves. But I also understand, it's also when you're sick, when you've been sick for a long time and you're scared. So it is challenging.
Yeah.
When I said that's where probably like some speech therapy can help people.
And it's interesting. So one thing that popped in that you said about 10, 15 some odd minutes ago is that everybody has some restriction, right? Because of even the nature of birth, coming through a birth canal, that your head and everything gets, and even if the baby's still malleable.
C-section, then you have some other worse restrictions. So it is what it is.
So explain that. So theoretically, because you work with adults, which is in my case, I met you as an adult. Ideally, if it's a child, how do you work with them? Like, so if in an ideal world, if Tanja could dictate, as the Taurus in you wants to dictate the world, as a child, if everybody brought their child to you, and I know it varies, and I'm asking you a general question, it's case by case, what types of common things do you feel children have that need to be addressed because of the nature of birthing?
I treat babies, and also at Happy Kids, we treat a lot of babies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the easiest. It's like, it's so easy to treat a baby. And it's like, if there's nothing big going on, if there's nothing obvious, it's like 1 or 2 sessions, the baby, literally you hold them, and because they are not the ego is not like
they're not programmed, they're not conditioned, there's no stories, there's no identity.
And they start doing their unwinding, stretching it out, because
elaborate on this. So elaborate again, go slow for the audience's sake, please. So this Moro reflexes, the stuff you've taught me, right? Explain what you mean by they naturally wriggle. What do you mean? Elaborate on that.
No. They're just just unwinding, because you're not straight in utero. You were like, and now you come out, and now you have to lay straight. I mean, that already is like, I mean, maybe I have to do a ketamine session and elaborate on my own birth, how that felt, like all of a sudden, like laying in a bed in a crib instead of being like this in utero.
Yeah.
Must feel like a child was, when you're sleeping on your arm, you have it in a certain position, all of a sudden you have to move it. It's like, Of course, babies are more flexible, but still, no. You hold them and they do it. They do the unwinding. It is beautiful. It's like they're just floating. It's like taking them. You're putting them in, getting them out of the gravity, and they can just, it's like a dance. It's like the fluids, everything flows, and they can just unwind, and boop, they're straight. Tension taken out of the spine. It's like labor. They're pushed in there, like if there's labor, like back and forth, and then with the neck and with the head.
So in a way, so it goes back to that automatic healing. So you're creating, so it's almost like you're cradling them, not necessarily in certain positions, creating that safety where they feel in a natural state. And then you're telling me that
doing the same with adults. I mean, when I'm holding your head, that's what we all do.
Well, focusing on the babies for now. So then they automatically wriggle and loosen out. Now, can you add, because I'm curious, right? Because I know you worked on me and I haven't seen you work on children per se. How do the reflexes that you taught me about, these prenatal reflexes that everybody has, how does that integrate to these restrictions and then the motor function? How can you talk about that a little bit if you feel?
Yeah, the reflexes, like the Moro and the fear paralysis,
right.
They only stay around if there's like trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So then some kids hold on to it, but you can also get the fear paralysis reflex reactivated if you had an accident. So adults with the whiplash, and if you have chronic disease, if you're sick, your reflexes are out. It just is.
So what you're saying is, so you have restrictions if you're born physically because of the physical birth, and you're saying, so I get the distinction now. So
I don't even focus that much on the reflexes when I treat a baby. It's like,
right. Well, real quick, bear with me. So then on the other end, so you have physical restrictions, and on the other end, what I'm hearing you say to distinguish it for the audience is that then you have, if the parent, while holding the baby in utero, if they have trauma, then that can impact, because that was my situation. I didn't work with you on it. Because you do certain parts and you have practitioners that you work in tandem with. The osteopaths, as I mentioned to you, help me with that in conjunction with you. So then we have two things going on. You have physical, I guess you can't really call it trauma, pressure from the birth. And then in some instances, if the parents, while having the baby in development in utero, have trauma, that can then affect these other prenatal reflexes or early childhood reflexes. Because I believe I had both, right? I had these restrictions, as you helped me with, and then I also had these traumas that then impacted my motor function, which made it hard, both of them together, to heal. Because I was in this I'm fine, locked state.
You also have the lip and the tongue tie.
Well, yeah. There's a lot.
You're a mouth breather, so.
Yeah. Oh, well, talk about that. Talk about mouth breathing for a second, because that goes to
one of the other things. Is like, I think I'm gonna,
How should people breathe? Let me rephrase that question. What is proper breathing, as far as when you're inhaling?
The tongue needs to be on the roof of the mouth.
So number one, tongue to the roof of the mouth, step by step. Okay.
And they teach it and now I forgot the name of what yogic form, but
don't worry about that. Keep going. So then tongue, and then
the mouth has to be closed.
Okay. And then what?
Breathe through the nose.
Okay. And then are they using their lungs, or are they using any other lower part of their stomach?
Breathing into the tummy, into the diaphragm.
The diaphragm. Yeah, there you go. And because I talk about it, and I'd rather them hear it from you, who's an actual, licensed practitioner, because a lot of people go, well, you don't have. Yeah.
That's what we do at Happy Kids. It's like it's the focus on how are the children breathing. Do they have a lip tie, a tongue tie? Where's the tongue position? And it starts with the babies when they have a tongue tie and the lip tie, and they can't nurse. So in the olden days, and not even in the olden days, even these days, sometimes they just go to bottle feeding because it's like, oh, I can't breastfeed. But then it's like, it might be because your baby can't latch on. So that in itself, I've seen adults who, that again, who are now whatever energy healer, whatever they're doing, and they come in, and then of course they have a story created, and they're like, oh yeah, my mother never loved me, she did not feed me, she starved me. And I'm looking at that person, and I'm looking at the face, and I'm like, I'm not saying anything, because sometimes you have to wait for the moment when it's right to say something. And I'm just thinking to myself, wow, that person has such a tongue tie. It's like you can see it already from the shape of the face. You can see the knock knees, the inverted feet. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, that's how you create a story around something that might not be true. It's just how you as a baby experienced it, because you're primitive, that's the primitive reflexes. It's all about, breathing, eating, sleeping, pooping, whatever. It's like you constantly feel like you're starving because you can't get the food because of whatever is restricted.
And then what is that? And so
you're
saying
restricted in the, if anybody who ever threw their neck out, I mean, if you would have to suck something with a straw, or you would have to nibble on something, it's like, you can't. And you go and see the chiropractor, but the baby is like, nobody, if you don't do anything with the baby, then again, it compensates, it works around it, but then later you have some other restrictions.
So as far as, I mean, one of the things that I learned through this process, to clarify or elaborate on what you're saying. So it's ideally you'd want to address these early on, because what I'm hearing from you, correct me if I'm wrong, is that leads to functional problems as you get older, as you mentioned from that client.
Anxiety. If you're mouth breathing, all these people who come in with depression, anxiety, they have tongue ties. The tongue is like on the bottom, all the way pulled back. They can't breathe. So if your brain doesn't get enough oxygen, of course you get some, mental and emotional.
Well, that's okay. So bear with me. So that's the emotional components. I was going to go one step further. What I'm hearing from you, correct me if I'm wrong, bear with me, is that yes, it affects their emotional and mental well-being. I'm also hearing back to this domino effect, like that lady you mentioned, that affects their mechanics of their body and the function of their body, which I feel, for me, and maybe a lot of people listening, because I find this, people are, and maybe this isn't true for the clients you see, the people that I see, and not only that I work with outside in the world, they're more willing to deal with their physical symptoms first. Then it's still taboo to go to therapy. So that's why I'm interested in focusing on this right now, because I go, okay, this is the path of least resistance. We can get to this. More people are wanting to deal with the material symptoms, because again, unfortunately, a lot of people are conditioned to deal with only physical. So I feel like what you're saying is ideally, as far as conscious parenting, because I know when you work with my sister-in-law at their clinic that you work part-time at, that's their focus is on the children, is you want to address and nip this in the bud early on to bring holistic healing. So you don't which great. I love what you said. You don't have the emotional, mental, the depression, all those things that you're very astutely alluding to. And for me, the functional, which I think for people, they can see it. They go, oh no, okay, that makes sense. My shoulder's been like this, and it's a result of this tongue tie and my mom, the umbilical cord, for instance, it was around my neck, etc.
Torticollis,
Yeah. So that's interesting. So then let me ask you this. So as far as like what seems to be happening now is flushing out this healing by numbers on this episode is, again, awareness, churn it within, start to know and define yourself, and then starting to feel into the pain or those blockages, those restrictions, and then allowing the release of the blockages. And then what you're saying, Tanja, in babies, you see it very beautifully, right? The natural healing response is all you got to do is hold them in a certain position. And if you allow, so even in adults, which you said about me, you create that safety, that relaxation can occur, and then the body starts to wriggle. And I think a lot of the times you're telling that to me, you're like, allow your body, Hass, to do what it wants to do. And I've done that, and people see me occasionally do this. It's like micro adjusting. And I find that that's been really funny, because before I even met you, I noticed I was trying to do it, only I thought it was weird. Oh, I shouldn't be doing that, right? So again, goes back to the story.
People do that, actually.
Yeah.
People. And also sometimes when I look at, then later, when the trauma has not been addressed, when you see people having tremors, it's like, that's.
Oh, you mean when they shake or their head shake?
That's also something where what they focus on in somatic experiencing, like just the tremors and shaking it off and looking at like, where is it coming from? Oh, I shake. I mean, I used to, even sometimes when I have sessions, I will shake like crazy. But I'm also at a point, nah, I think even back then already, it's like my body, I learned at one point that my body is boss. So it's like, even if I don't want to, at one point, it's just like, no, if my body needs to shake, I just need to let it shake. I mean, years ago, I have done it like maybe sitting on the parking lot at Target. I'm like, oh, I have to sit in my car. I'm like, okay, I have to shake this off real quick. But that's what
Allow what's happening.
in the wild. When you look at, some of those videos, if an antelope gets chased by a lion, if it gets away, if it doesn't get eaten, eventually it will stand there, it will shake, and then it will just walk off. That's why they don't have to go and take antidepressants or see a psychotherapist. That's the typical instinct. It's like, it's a nervous system. It's because you're like, ooh, you have to,
So you're actually, because you're holding it and you're not allowing the natural release or the natural response. So is that why my mom, after obviously all the traumas, my brother's passing, so that would explain why she would do this. And she didn't even know it.
No, it's
that
just
she was doing it, that it was stored anxiety. It was stored trauma.
emotions,
It's interesting. I met a guy recently and I was actually a very powerful healer. And yeah, so it was interesting because he's starting to develop the shaking. And when in our conversation, it was around this notion of, bringing up the soul level, because in his instance, he had done the physical and he'd done the emotional and he'd done the mental. There was only one layer left of this 4 body systems, right?
Not that I don't know the person.
Right.
I suspect he is just full of who he's treating, and he hasn't opened this up fully, and that's why
the heart
needs to come out.
Correct. So let's talk about that. That's a good segue.
Session years ago with your beloved brother, and I was shaking for 2 days, passing out and screaming and crying, and everything came out of my hands. That's the whole shaking. Like, it has to come out of. Like, usually when you have something twisted, it's your heart, and you think you have done all your work, but it's like, yeah.
So it's interesting. So both of those parallel one another. This particular gentleman we're alluding to, and then your own release, right? Is that in some cases there's so much constriction that it's almost an explosive release. So in this instance, you read it accurately, because I intuited that it was also some emotional blockages in the heart, and he was bottled up, is what I kept telling him. Yeah. And that's a point, right? We're all walking around in our heads, bottled up. A lot of this is in the body, right? There's no vulnerability. The power is in the vulnerability. It's a responsibility we each have to then get out of our head, get into our body. And so in some instances, you're saying that you may even have, because it's so extreme of a dis-ease, you may have a really powerful release. Is that accurate from like what you described about my brother working on you?
Who knows? I mean, everybody's individual, obviously, but usually when you're shaking, it's like, you need to shake something off.
I like that. If you shake or you have a tremor, you need to shake something off. I like that. You need to shake it off. Literally, alchemize it.
I had a session this year. I was probably shaking the entire hour, like for a whole hour. I was even spitting out the acupuncture needles because I do not want to have them in my body. So my body literally like kicked them out. My body was
really?
Yeah, of course. My body is boss. When I go into a session, it's like, I can just watch it. It's like, oh my God, this is just crazy. And then a conditioning, again, everybody has their own restrictions. So not what, my story is not someone else's story. Everybody has their own story, and something needs to shake off. So in my case, something had to come off, which then finally I saw it. I saw it. I acknowledged what it was. I didn't have to tell anybody. It's just within myself. Just like when you do your work, right? You don't have to tell everybody who's around you. I saw it. I acknowledged it. I let it go out of my physical, even though it was a psycho-spiritual imprint, but it had to get out of my physical, and then my shaking stopped. So it's like, I mean, again, like just like how we started this interview today, it's like we have a physical body for a reason. And everything that we experience, it goes through the physical. And even though we acknowledge it with here, we acknowledge it, we see it, we can let it go from here. If we don't do that, Yeah. It's in
But
the
we're
body.
not really living in our body, right? It's this notion of living around our body, not
Yes.
living in our body, which is the problem. I mean, that was a problem for me. And yeah, we should do, this is a good point to do our proverbial legal disclaimer, because this is not medical advice. This is a general discussion. And as Tanja alluded to, not everybody is going to be a black and white. These are a general, I guess you could say, thematic ways of approaching this, because yes, it is. The classic lawyer answer is when they ask a lawyer, what is this? It goes, it depends. It always depends.
It really, again, back to individual person. I have one woman, oh my goodness, she only had 2 sessions and she had the biggest pop and crack even 2 weeks after the sessions. And her back is straight. Her scoliosis is almost gone. She came in last week. We were both looking at her. I'm like, oh my goodness. But it's not about me. It's not, I mean, I did what I would do with anybody. It is not that I would go out, hey, I make your scoliosis go away after 2 sessions. No, but it happened. And I'm like, even like, what? We were looking at this just a little, and she's in her 40s or no, or whatever. Or like, she's not, it's not like if she's a kid and she had it for a long time. And we were like, woof. It was just
Well, that's
crazy.
rather miraculous. So it can't happen. And I think, yeah.
But when people already come in and they're like, oh, how many sessions? I'm like, I don't know, but usually it's like at least 2 or 3, so we get the basic stuff out of the way.
Right.
Then let's see what's gonna happen.
Well, this is interesting, right? Because this goes back, from my perspective, from my interpretation, that goes back to the head. If you come in either as a practitioner or as a client expecting mentally, this is what I want, you won't, again, you're staying in your head and you're not allowing the body. So in that instance, the scoliosis lady, for instance, I would say it was divine, right? Everybody came in, you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. She didn't have a preconceived idea, story, outcome. And then like the baby, the wiggling, God's natural wiggling happens.
But she's also a coach, so maybe,
Well, I think that speaks to it, right? Because as an advanced, as an advanced practitioner, it makes it easier.
Exactly, she just hadn't gotten the missing physical and etheric balancing.
Well, it's like me. That's why I started to speak over you. It was this notion of, I feel like we both, you get 2 different buckets. You get people that are newer to this, and you get what I would call the masters or the healers, where you're healing a healer. And like me, I have both buckets. So yes, it's a luxury to have a Hass or a coach, because then they've done the preliminary work, so they can dive really deep right away. Maybe they haven't done the physical work. It still makes it easier, which is what we've been talking about this whole time, versus somebody who's new, because you got to do, again, this step by step.
But even, but then again, even people who just come in for the physical ailments, they can be fine after 2 or 3 sessions. And they don't even have to go anywhere, like looking at it really depends on the individual. They don't have to look at anything, what happened to them or whatever. It's just, let's just
interesting.
Treat it. I have that a lot, because a lot of people come to me for pain.
Okay.
Come to me for, whatever other reasons.
Okay.
No. And I have a lot of men, clients, which is interesting, because usually we always think, oh, men, don't really take care of themselves. But, they come in with whatever, neck pain, back pain, and they hear from someone, they hear from the family, and then they just come in.
So you can bypass the knowing where the pain and the restriction or the trauma came from and jump right ahead. So I like that. Yeah, you don't have to define it.
Exactly. It's like, because I like to help everybody, it's not like you have to, those people who don't know anything about other things, it's also fine. It's just, let's just balance something, get that out of the way, and maybe that's all you need at this point.
It's, again, goes back to that stages, or the process of healing is almost like stages along the way. Some people don't, may not have to go all the way. They can stop here, and that may be enough for them, so to speak. Yeah, there's levels.
And then it's like, sometimes also the notion, we always think we have to feel good after a treatment, because people are so used to, get a massage, you feel better, but you only feel better for 3 days or 4 days, and then stuff just comes back. Because today in the morning, I was like thinking about it. I'm like, when I have a treatment, with your brother, I always take like 3 days off afterwards, because I know I'm not going to be feeling good. But then, just because it's just like the body needs to rest. I could never imagine for me going in for treatment like this or like craniosacral or whatever, and then going back to work. It's like, no, you want to really, take your time and be with your body, be inside your body.
It's interesting, right? Because that's a great 2 points there.
You don't always feel good after your treatment, do you?
Well, so I'd say two things. So I was going to speak to this. So no, well, and here's why. And then I wanted to say, so great point there to dovetail it. I give the analogy is it's almost like the rock at the bottom of the lake, and you're lifting the rock and the sediment is coming up. So that's why oftentimes, especially if you're newer to this work, I tell people, look, you may feel moody. If I do it, because a lot of the work I'm doing is consciousness work. It's in their mind, in their heart, and that soul level. And I tell them, you're going to be moody, which goes to this other point, right? And I like that you brought it up again. It's very inspired and improvisational, is the rest, the stillness that you can't race into doing again because you need time to integrate the healing. So we're talking you may have releases that then bring up things for a few days. And
but it's also just, again, that's very German looking at it. It's like, if you change something in one area, the rest has to follow. So it's all about you are healing or releasing something in one area. So now the rest has to, oh. Oh my God. Okay, here we go. No, sorry, my computer just wanted to, I can't see you anymore, Hass.
It's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, my computer wants to update. So, here we go.
There you go. No problem. Yeah, it got excited. Your computer got so excited by the energy of this.
Right?
It's like, I need to heal myself and update myself right now. Your computer, Microsoft is learning mastery, and
Apple.
It's Apple, even better. Yeah, there you go. Apple wants to update and heal itself. I mean, what a great dramatic interruption.
But just like I was saying, if you change something in one area, the other areas to follow. It's just like with an earthquake. If there's an earthquake in one area of the world has to adjust somewhere else. That's why I always say, if there's a big one, whatever, in Alaska, there's a big one somewhere else.
Well, and that goes back to what I see it as like dominoes, right? And it's like everything's interconnected, because a lot of the work you're doing is on the fascia, which if people don't know, that's that like almost like a layer of it's like a suit that you have. It's like how would you describe fascia? Because I probably wouldn't say it right. How would you describe fascia, Tanja?
Fascia is everything that surrounds the muscles, it surrounds the organs, it surrounds the nerves. But I'm not even so sure that I'm just treating fascia, because
I'm oversimplifying what you do for the audiences.
Going even deeper.
Right.
So I like to go as deep into the body as I can to heal from the inside out. And then again, going as deep inside so you can come out. Yeah, fascia is connective tissue.
Well, that's it. There we go. So that's the point I want, the physical, the functional, because that's what I learned through you. Is she may be working over here on me. If I rush back to work and I don't give time to integrate the other part of my body, let's say my rib cage here, which is connected because it's all interconnected. It's all one at a functional level too. Micro matches the macro. That you're not gonna allow the dominoes to then realign in your body to step into healing. I like that. I mean, that's so. Where to wrap up? Where do you feel the role of rest, stillness? Where do you think that's important in healing? Because with vulnerability, everybody thinks it's a doing, right? It's I have to do vulnerability. What's your relationship to resting and stillness and being vulnerable?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I just live my life like this. Like every day when I'm working, I'm literally meditating. Like, I'm in a different, frequency. So my work is very vitalizing. Because sometimes people ask me, do you not get tired or exhausted? I'm like, no. But again, because I don't make the person's story my own, I do my own healing. And then sometimes when that's another interesting thing. People come in and then they're just projecting, right? Instead of that's also a thing. Instead of just they're coming in for themselves, but that's their character. That's just how they are. They're so like always about the other person. And then they're like, oh, you have to do this meditation. You have to read this. Number one, I probably have already done that like 10 or 15 years ago. And number two, I cannot listen to meditation because it takes me out of my stillness.
You have your own meditation. Well, I like that.
I'm constantly in meditation. When I'm not talking, literally when I'm not talking, my tongue is at the roof of the mouth, completely, also the posterior part. I'm in my body. But so when I'm working, that's how I listen to the body. If I wouldn't be grounded within myself, I wouldn't get the pieces of glass messages and all that stuff. So it is really an art of going within. Of course, I can have fun with friends. I mean, last year I danced at a party. Snoop Dogg was DJing. Oh my God, I had so much fun. I was drunk at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I was just dancing like it was 1991 in Germany. And, but then afterwards, I have to sit and go within and become still again.
Well, it's this notion of shifting from that external orientation, which you talk about with projecting, going within. And then it's interesting, right? Because what you're describing is this meditative state. When you finish the healing process, you'll find that your natural state of being, which we talked about earlier, we both freaked out when we started because we got so relaxed. We weren't used to stillness in the body. And stillness is actually the natural state. And it's just, of course, it's a duality. It's a paradox. There's stillness and there's movement. So the universe is doing this and it's completely still at the same time. I feel we're so much on this orientation, much like the external orientation, we need to go within. We're also in a doing orientation, and the stillness being orientation is what I learned from you. And I like what you said, because then you're perpetually in that state, which goes back to mastery. It's a state of being. It's not like you get a title from God and you're like, oh, you're a master now. Here you go. You're, no, it's a state of being. And then, you can go to a Snoop Dogg DJ party and we still, I mean, that's another funny thing you bring up, because people think, oh, you're holier than now because you're a master or healer. No, I still live. I experience life.
I don't chant. I don't do anything. I watch Dancing with the Stars. I watch the Housewives of Beverly Hills. That kind of like gets on my
Listen, you may not want to go down the I watch reality TV. You may lose some clients doing that. No,
90-Day Fiance is like the best part ever. No, I'm like, I watch TV. I even watch the news. Most of the time I have to laugh, which is probably not nice either, but it's just...
Well, we'll avoid that for now. So that's, again, and I thought of this earlier, and I know
I watch it by being still. I sit in front of it.
Well, that's the point I was going to draw, is this differently. Yeah, it's this point, right? So bear with me. It's this point of the guest house, the Rumi poem, right? Because when I listen to you, I go, look, Tanja is no longer filtering out life, trying to live around or adjust her life. She can take everything that comes her way because she can embody that stillness, that beingness, and therefore she can live freely. And actually, as the guest house poem says, everything she can open the door of life to, whether it be this, or that. So that's, I want to kind of wrap this up on this point. Is I posted on this quote, and I know you noticed it and said that this is kind of relevant to what we'll be talking about. So again, very synchronistically timed. Is a quote by Marguerite. I'm probably saying her last name. It's Italian, I believe. Rigoglioso. Marguerite Rigoglioso. So may I feel all I need to feel in order to heal. May I heal all I need to heal in order to feel, which goes to the point of what Tanja's talking about, the guest house of, even if she's watching trauma on the news, the dramatization on the news, if she's at a joyful event, she can take it from an equanimous, a masterful, a meditative or a being state and really live life fully, as she alluded to. And that's why we wanted to talk about this today, is because how can you lead fully if you're not living fully? Because they're one and the same. You don't have all of your presence. And that's the so what that we want to leave you with today, is that if you don't, and again, everybody has their stages. We honor everybody's process. If you're new to this, and we're not here to black and white it. Life is all about color, and there's no right or wrong. It's this notion of there is power in this vulnerability. There is a power now in the vulnerability of going within the body and to heal through that vulnerability. Any parting words for today? We will be coming back, Tanja and I, for at least one more, if not many more special episodes on this series.
Empath empowerment, right?
Yeah, empath empowerment will be our third, which will be later on down the line. Any parting words for today? Anything coming through that you want to leave the audience with for today? Nah, that's classic Tanja. She's very humble and short on words.
You know what? Yeah. Now let me just say something that just, as you were talking, that came up.
Yeah.
It's again about that inner child, and it also applies.
Okay.
Even though I have like an older, body,
and by she means soul, everybody. She means soul, translating from Tanja East.
Soul, also like this,
everything. I know. Yeah.
I still feel like a child. And when I'm working, I'm having fun as if I'm a child. Seriously. It's like I'm having fun. I also like working, when I work with the little kids, I always see the adult in them and also who they were. And when I work with adults, I always see the kid in them. Unfortunately, most adults have kind of like, because now you're grown up, you have to behave a certain way. If everybody could lighten up, not take life so serious and also themselves, and just find that child, but maybe they didn't have joy in their childhood. Well, that's where the inner child work.
That goes to the healing. Again, you're coming full
Exactly.
circle.
So
Mhm.
if you can find that and then live it like this, like, the exciting thing is like, for me, when I see like a bird outside, I'm like, yeah, there's a bird. So I still get that excitement that a little child has. So see the world through the eyes of a child.
I like that. And yeah, it's beautifully stated because, you have the mystical traditions. I think it's the Buddhists that say childlike curiosity. In some traditions, they say this is all child's play. Life is all child's play. And it's a great way to wrap up because, in a sense, that's the innocence, right? In a sense, that's the innocence.
That's also my motivation in human design. So not everybody has that motivation.
Well,
Again,
that's okay. They may not be wired. I feel regardless, there is a core, an axiom of innocence and childlike joy in each of us. And some of us may never have seen it because of the conditioning and the traumas, and this healing needs to bring it out. And some of us may have experienced it, and we can unpack an even more, because I would be known as a joyful child. I feel I've unpacked an even deeper level, an embodiment of that joy. It's no longer only a concept, it's an actual state of beingness. So to wrap up, here's the formula that seems to be kind of in a general sense, and I'm saying formula loosely, is listen. It's going to be the awareness, right? What Tanja started with is this awareness, shifting, getting out of the head, diving deep into the body, starting to know yourself, and then feeling in and diving towards the pain, towards the restrictions, towards the discomfort, and then allowing the release of these blockages to then actually let healing happen on its own, which healing is automatic, as we said, and then rest, the stillness to allow the integration, to allow the body to settle, to allow the readjustment. And then lastly, once you come out the other end, joy, love, spread it. And this may not be true for everybody. This is not meant to be you do this and it will work. It's a process. Trust the process. Be open, allow. Tanja, I love you. Thank you again for sharing space, for your magnificence, your wisdom, your quirkiness that I enjoy that matches my quirkiness. And
right.
thank you all for listening. I hope you found this enlightening. And as she said, bringing out that light, that's what healing does. And healing is relocating, remembering that light. So really, in a funny way, you're really going back. Healing is really going back to that which you were, a child of the universe, in a sense. So thank you all for watching this special episode of the Vulnerable Power Show. We'll see you again soon, and have a blessed and joyful and childlike day ahead.